At my husband's funeral, his mistress smirked, until I handed her the letter he left for me. I never imagined that the worst day of my life would also become the day I discovered the truth about everything. My name is Margaret, and I'm 58 years old. I've lived a full life, raised 3 beautiful children, built a career as a nurse, and loved one man for 35 years. That man was Robert, my husband. Or at least, I thought I knew who he was. The day of his funeral arrived with a gray sky that matched my soul. Rain threatened but never came, as if even nature was holding its breath. I stood there in my black dress, my daughter Jessica on one side, my son Michael on the other. My youngest, David, stood behind me with his hand on my shoulder. We were a wall of grief, united in our loss. Robert had died suddenly from a heart attack at 62. No warning. No goodbye. Just gone. The funeral home was packed. Robert had been a successful architect, well loved in our community. Friends, colleagues, and family filled every seat. I moved through the receiving line like a ghost, shaking hands I couldn't feel, accepting condolences I couldn't hear. My mind was numb. 35 years of marriage, and it ended with a phone call from the hospital telling me my husband was dead. If you've ever lost someone suddenly, write in the comments how you coped. I'd love to know I'm not alone in this. Then she walked in. And everything changed. I was standing near Robert's casket, my hand resting on the polished wood, when I heard the whispers. The kind of whispers that ripple through a crowd like wind through wheat. I looked up, and there she was. A white woman, probably in her early 30s, wearing a tight red dress. Red. To a funeral. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her makeup dramatic, and she wore heels so high I wondered how she walked. But it wasn't her outfit that made my blood run cold. It was the smile on her face. She walked down the aisle slowly, deliberately, making sure everyone saw her. And when our eyes met, that smile widened into something cruel. Something victorious. She knew I knew. And she didn't care. In that moment, this shocking funeral became something else entirely. This was a declaration of war. My daughter Jessica grabbed my arm. "Mom, who is that?" she whispered urgently. I couldn't answer. My throat had closed. My son Michael stepped forward, ready to confront her, but I held up my hand. Something in me, some instinct I didn't know I possessed, told me to wait. To watch. To stay calm. The woman in red walked right up to the casket. She placed her hand on it, right next to mine, and leaned down as if to whisper something to Robert's body. Then she looked at me again, and this time she spoke loud enough for everyone around us to hear. "He loved me more than he ever loved you," she said. Her voice was sweet, almost sing-song. "Just thought you should know." The funeral home went silent. 200 people held their breath. My children moved to shield me, but I stepped around them. I looked at this woman, this stranger who claimed to know my husband better than I did, and I felt something unexpected. Not rage. Not even pain. Just a strange, cold clarity. "What's your name?" I asked quietly. She seemed surprised by the question. "Vanessa," she said, tossing her hair. "Vanessa Hartley. We were together for 3 years. He was going to leave you, you know. He told me everything about you. How you'd gotten old. How you'd stopped trying. How I made him feel young again." Each word was designed to wound. Each word was a knife aimed at my heart. And each word made me more certain of one thing: she had no idea what was coming. This dramatic confession was about to backfire in ways she couldn't imagine. 3 years, I repeated. I looked at my children, saw the shock and anger on their faces, then looked back at Vanessa. "That's interesting. Because 3 years ago, Robert and I renewed our vows on our anniversary. We went to Jamaica. He wrote me a poem. We made love on the beach at sunset." Vanessa's smile faltered, just for a second. "But you wouldn't know about that," I continued. "Because whatever Robert told you, whatever fantasy he sold you, it was just that. A fantasy. And fantasies die with the dreamer. I turned away from her then, back to my husband's casket. My hands were shaking, but my voice had been steady. Behind me, I heard someone escort Vanessa to a seat in the back. The whispers resumed, but different now. Speculative. Uncomfortable. The shocking revelation that my husband had a mistress spread through the funeral like wildfire, and I knew by tomorrow, everyone in town would be talking about Margaret, the devoted wife who'd been betrayed. But they didn't know the half of it. Because in my purse, I carried a letter. A letter Robert's lawyer had given me just that morning, with specific instructions: open this after the funeral. Read it alone. And then decide what to do next. I made it through the rest of the service somehow. The pastor spoke beautiful words about Robert's life, his accomplishments, his love for his family. My daughter gave a tearful eulogy that broke my heart all over again. And through it all, I felt Vanessa's eyes on me from the back of the room, watching, waiting, gloating. At the cemetery, as they lowered Robert into the ground, I finally let myself cry. Not for the man I'd lost, but for the marriage I'd thought we had. For the life I'd believed in. For the fool I'd been. My children held me as I sobbed, and I heard David say something I'll never forget: "Dad didn't deserve you, Mom." He never did. Maybe he was right. Or maybe love is more complicated than deserving. Maybe it's about choosing someone every day, even when they don't choose you back. But I didn't have answers anymore. I just had that letter burning a hole in my purse and a mystery story that was about to unfold. After the burial, people came back to our house for the reception. It's a Southern tradition, feeding people after funerals, and my church ladies had prepared enough food to feed an army. I moved through my own home like a stranger, accepting hugs, nodding at stories about Robert, all while feeling like I was underwater. Everything was muffled. Distant. Unreal. Vanessa had the audacity to show up there too. She stood in my living room, eating my food, drinking my wine, laughing too loudly at someone's story. She was performing, I realized. This whole thing was a performance. She wanted me to break. She wanted a scene. She wanted to prove that she'd won. But I had that letter. And I had a feeling she hadn't won anything at all. Finally, after what felt like hours, the last guest left. My children wanted to stay, wanted to help clean up, but I sent them home. I need some time alone, I told them. Please. I promise I'll call if I need anything. They left reluctantly, and suddenly my house was silent. 35 years of marriage, and this was what it came to. An empty house and a letter from a dead man. I poured myself a glass of Robert's favorite whiskey, the expensive stuff he saved for special occasions, and sat down at the kitchen table. My hands were shaking as I opened the envelope. The letter was thick, at least 10 pages, written in Robert's careful handwriting. Just seeing those familiar loops and curves made my eyes burn with fresh tears. But I blinked them away and started to read. And with each word, the shocking truth began to emerge. My dearest Margaret, it began. If you're reading this, I'm gone. And I'm so sorry. Sorry for leaving you, sorry for what I'm about to tell you, and sorry for being the kind of man who needs to write this letter at all. I need you to know the truth about Vanessa. About everything. Because she's going to come for you, and you need to be ready. My heart started pounding. This wasn't the confession I'd expected. This wasn't a love letter to his mistress accidentally given to his wife. This was something else. Something darker. An emotional drama I couldn't have predicted. I met Vanessa 3 years ago at a conference in Miami, Robert wrote. She was beautiful, charming, and she paid attention to me in a way I'm ashamed to admit I craved. You were busy with your nursing career, the kids were grown, and I felt invisible. So yes, I had an affair. I'm not going to make excuses for it. I betrayed you, betrayed our vows, betrayed everything we built together. And I'll regret it until my dying day. Which, I suppose, has already come and gone by the time you read this. I had to stop reading for a moment. Even though I'd suspected the affair after seeing Vanessa at the funeral, seeing it confirmed in Robert's own words felt like a fresh wound. The family betrayal cut deep. I took a long drink of whiskey and kept reading. But here's what you don't know, Margaret. Here's what I discovered about 6 months ago, and what I've been carefully documenting ever since. Vanessa isn't who she says she is. And our affair wasn't the romantic love story she's probably trying to sell. It was a con. And I was her mark. Now he had my full attention. I leaned forward, my eyes racing across the page, desperate to understand this unexpected twist. It started when I noticed money missing from our savings account. Small amounts at first, a few hundred here and there. Then larger sums. When I confronted her, Vanessa said she needed help with her sick mother's medical bills. Showed me hospital paperwork and everything. So I gave her $10,000. Then 20. Then 50. By the time I started getting suspicious, she'd taken over $200,000 from me. My hand started shaking so badly I almost dropped the letter. $200,000. Money I hadn't even known was missing. How? How had he hidden this from me? I opened secret accounts, Robert continued, as if reading my mind. Accounts you didn't know about. Money from projects I did on the side, money I'd been saving for our retirement. I was going to surprise you with it on our 40th anniversary. But instead, I gave it all to her. Because I was a fool. Because I believed her. The dramatic storytelling in this letter was almost too much to bear. But I couldn't stop reading. I needed to know everything. So I hired a private investigator. And Margaret, what he found. Robert's handwriting got messier here, as if he'd been writing fast, emotion overwhelming him. She's done this before. Multiple times. She targets older, successful men in positions like mine. Men with money and marriages that might be vulnerable. She seduces them, plays the damsel in distress, and bleeds them dry. Then she moves on to the next victim. But it gets worse. Vanessa is actually married. Her real name is Vanessa Hartley Chin. Her husband, David Chin, is in on it. They work as a team. He stays in the background while she runs the cons. They've done this in 5 different states over the past decade. The investigator found at least 7 other men she'd scammed the same way. One of them committed suicide after losing his entire retirement fund. I felt sick. Actually physically sick. I ran to the bathroom and barely made it to the toilet before I threw up. When I came back, shaking and pale, I poured another glass of whiskey and forced myself to keep reading. This shocking family secret was turning into something even more sinister than I could have imagined. I confronted her 2 months ago, Robert wrote. Told her I knew everything. Threatened to go to the police. And do you know what she did? She laughed. Said I had no proof that would hold up in court. Said that even if I did, she'd tell you everything about the affair, destroy our marriage, turn the kids against me. She said she'd paint me as the predator, her as the victim. And in this climate, who would people believe? The young white woman or the older black man? There it was. The ugly truth underneath everything. Race and gender weaponized as tools of manipulation. Robert, for all his faults, had understood the impossible position he was in. An emotional twist that made this story even more complex. So I made a plan, the letter continued. Because I knew my heart was failing. The doctor had told me I had maybe a year, 2 if I was lucky. I didn't tell you because I couldn't bear to. I was too ashamed of everything I'd done. So instead, I used my time to build a case. I documented everything. Every payment, every lie, every piece of evidence the investigator found. I compiled it all into a file that my lawyer now has. And I changed my will. My breath caught. The dramatic will. This was what the lawyer had mentioned when he gave me the letter. In my original will, I left everything to you and the kids, as it should be. But 1 month ago, I created a new will. In this one, I left Vanessa $1 million. Yes, you read that right. $1 million. I almost screamed. Had Robert lost his mind? Had this woman somehow convinced him to betray his family even in death? Keep reading, the letter said, as if Robert knew exactly what I'd be thinking. Because here's the thing about that money. It doesn't exist. Or rather, it exists, but it comes with conditions that Vanessa will never be able to meet. The $1 million comes from a trust one set up, funded by liquidating some investments. But to claim it, Vanessa has to provide documentation proving she's legally unmarried, has no criminal record, and has paid back the $200,000 she took from me. She has to sign a sworn affidavit stating she never engaged in fraud or deception. And she has to pass a background check conducted by a forensic accountant who will have access to all her financial records. A laugh burst out of me. A wild, slightly hysterical laugh. Robert, even in death, had set a trap. A beautiful, perfect trap. This revenge story was better than anything I could have imagined. She'll never be able to claim that money, Robert wrote. Because the moment she tries, the evidence will surface. Her marriage. Her criminal history in other states. Her pattern of fraud. Everything. And the lawyer has instructions to turn all of it over to the police the moment she makes her claim. The will reading is scheduled for 1 week after my funeral. She'll be there, excited and greedy. And that's when everything will come crashing down on her. Margaret, I know this doesn't make up for what I did. I know that I betrayed you in the worst possible way. I broke our vows, I lied to you, and I let my ego and my weakness put our family at risk. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I am asking you to let me do this one thing right. Let me protect you and the kids from her. Let me make sure she pays for what she's done, not just to us, but to all her other victims. I love you. I've always loved you, even when I was too stupid to show it. You deserved so much better than me. But if there's any justice in this world, at least you'll see her brought down. The lawyer will give you copies of everything. You can decide what to do with it. Press charges, sue her for the money back, or just watch her get arrested at the will reading. Your choice. But please know that every day of our marriage, even the days I was betraying you, part of me knew that you were the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm sorry I wasn't the man you thought I was. But I hope I can at least be the man who protected you in the end. All my love, forever, Robert. I sat at that kitchen table for hours after finishing the letter, just staring at those pages. Crying, laughing, feeling everything and nothing all at once. This heartbreaking story had so many layers, so many emotions, I didn't know where to even begin processing it all. Robert had betrayed me. But he'd also tried to save me. He'd been weak and foolish. But in the end, he'd been brave enough to face the truth and do something about it. Did that make it okay? No. Did it erase the pain? Absolutely not. But it complicated things. It made the story of our marriage something other than a simple tale of infidelity and love betrayal. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I read through the documents the lawyer had included with the letter. Page after page of evidence. Bank records showing the money transfers. Copies of text messages between Vanessa and her husband discussing their projects. Background reports on their previous victims. Photos of them together, clearly a couple, taken months before she'd supposedly met Robert. She'd played him perfectly. But he'd figured it out. And now, she was about to pay the price. The week between the funeral and the will reading felt like the longest of my life. I didn't tell my children about the letter yet. I wanted to wait until after everything was resolved. Instead, I went through Robert's things, sorted through 35 years of shared life, and tried to figure out who I was now that I was alone. Vanessa called me 3 times during that week. Each time, her voice was syrupy sweet, fake concern dripping from every word. I just wanted to check on you, she'd say. I know Robert would want me to make sure you're okay. I hung up on her every time. I wasn't ready to play my hand yet. Let her think she'd won. Let her think I was just the broken, betrayed wife. The shocking revelation was coming for her, and she had no idea. The day of the will reading arrived. I dressed carefully that morning, choosing a simple black sheath dress and pearls. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. I'd lost weight. There were new lines around my eyes. But there was something else too. A hardness that hadn't been there before. A strength born of betrayal and survival. My children met me at the lawyer's office. They still didn't know about the letter, about any of it. They just knew we were here to settle their father's estate. Jessica held my hand in the waiting room. Michael paced nervously. David sat silent, his jaw tight with anger that still hadn't faded since the funeral. Then Vanessa arrived. She swept in wearing designer clothes and an expression of barely concealed excitement. She saw us and had the audacity to approach. "Margaret," she said, reaching for my hand. "I'm so glad you're here. I know this must be difficult for you." I pulled my hand away. "Sit down, Vanessa," I said quietly. "The lawyer will be with us shortly." Something in my tone made her pause. For just a second, I saw uncertainty flash across her face. But then her mask was back in place, that confident smile that said she thought she'd won. Robert's lawyer, Mr. Harrison, was a distinguished black man in his 60s who'd been Robert's friend for 30 years. When he called us into his office, his expression was grave. We all sat, my children on one side of me, Vanessa on the other, and Mr. Harrison began to read. The will started normally. Robert left the house to me. His retirement accounts to be split between me and the children. Personal belongings distributed according to wishes we discussed years ago. Standard stuff. My children relaxed slightly. Vanessa fidgeted, clearly impatient. Then Mr. Harrison paused. "And now we come to a special bequest," he said, looking directly at Vanessa. "To Vanessa Hartley, I leave the sum of $1 million, to be distributed from the trust established in her name." Vanessa gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. She looked at me, triumph blazing in her eyes. "See?" That look said. He loved me. He chose me. However, Mr. Harrison continued, and that one word made Vanessa's smile freeze. "This bequest comes with certain conditions that must be met before the funds can be released." He began listing them. The proof of unmarried status. The background check. The return of the $200,000. The sworn affidavit. With each requirement, Vanessa's face went paler. By the time he finished, she looked like she might be sick. I don't understand," she stammered. "Why would Robert put all these conditions? This doesn't make sense." "It makes perfect sense," I said quietly. "Because Robert knew exactly who you are, Vanessa. Or should I say, Mrs. Chin." The color drained completely from her face. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder. The folder Robert had prepared, filled with all the evidence. I slid it across Mr. Harrison's desk to her. "Go ahead. Look inside. See what your dear Robert knew about you." With shaking hands, Vanessa opened the folder. I watched as she flipped through page after page. Bank records. Text messages. Photos of her with her real husband. Reports on her previous victims. Everything. All of it documented and undeniable. "How?" she whispered. "How did he?" "He hired an investigator," I said. 6 months ago, when he finally got smart. He documented everything, Vanessa. Every lie you told. Every dollar you stole. Every other man you've conned. It's all there. And copies have already been sent to the police." She looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. "You can't do this." I'll tell everyone what he did. About our affair. About how he pursued me." "Go ahead," I said calmly. "Tell them." Tell them how you seduced a dying man and stole $200,000 from him. Tell them how you're actually married and this is your 10th victim. Tell them anything you want. Because in about 5 minutes, there are going to be police officers here to arrest you for fraud and theft. As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. Mr. Harrison stood and opened it, and 2 police officers stepped inside. Vanessa Hartley-Chin, one of them said. You're under arrest for multiple counts of fraud, theft, and conspiracy. The dramatic revelation was complete. The mystery letter had led to this perfect moment of justice. As they read Vanessa her rights and put handcuffs on her wrists, she stared at me with pure hatred. You think you've won? She spat. You think this changes anything? He still chose me. He still came to me. Your marriage was a lie. Maybe it was, I said. But at least I know who I am. Can you say the same? They led her out, and suddenly the office was silent. My children sat stunned, trying to process everything they'd just witnessed. Finally, Jessica spoke. Mom, how long have you known? Since the day of the funeral, I said. Your father left me a letter explaining everything. He wanted me to have the choice of what to do with the information. So I chose this. I chose to let her think she'd won, right up until the moment it all came crashing down. Michael shook his head in disbelief. Dad planned all of this? Even knowing he was dying? He did, Mr. Harrison confirmed. Robert came to me 3 months ago with all of this evidence. We worked together to structure the will in exactly this way. He wanted to make sure Mrs. Chin would be held accountable, but he also wanted to give your mother the power to decide how it happened. David stood and came to me, wrapping me in a tight hug. I'm so sorry, Mom, he said. For everything Dad put you through. But I'm kind of proud of him. For doing the right thing in the end. I hugged him back, tears streaming down my face. Me too, baby. Me too. Over the next few weeks, the story came out. The news picked it up because Vanessa and her husband had victims in multiple states. The YouTube storytime community covered it. People I hadn't spoken to in years reached out to tell me they'd heard about what happened and wanted to offer support. It was overwhelming and exhausting and strangely cathartic all at once. Vanessa pled guilty eventually, faced with the mountain of evidence Robert had compiled. She got 7 years in prison. Her husband got 10 because of his prior record. The $200,000 was recovered from their accounts and returned to Robert's estate, which meant more money for me and my children. The other victims came forward once they heard about the case, and several of them thanked me for having the courage to press charges. But the real healing didn't come from the justice. It came from something deeper. It came from finally being honest about my marriage, about Robert, about everything. 3 months after the will reading, I gathered my children together and we had a long, honest conversation about their father. I told them about the good years, the love we'd shared, the family we'd built. But I also told them about his flaws, his betrayal, his weakness. And about his attempt at redemption. We cried together. We laughed at memories. We let ourselves be angry and sad and confused all at once. Was Dad a good man? Jessica asked me at one point. I thought about it carefully before answering. Your father was a complicated man, I finally said. He did some terrible things. He betrayed me in ways I'm still processing. But he also loved you kids fiercely. He built a good life for us. And in the end, he tried to make things right. Does that make him good? I don't know. But it makes him human. And maybe that's enough. We're still healing. All of us. There are days when I'm angry at Robert, days when I miss him desperately, and days when I feel both things at once. I'm in therapy now, working through decades of marriage and trying to figure out who Margaret is when she's not defined by being Robert's wife. I'm 58 years old. I have more life behind me than ahead of me, probably. But I also have something I didn't have before, freedom. Freedom to be myself. Freedom to make mistakes. Freedom to start over. I've started painting again, something I gave up when the kids were born. I've reconnected with old friends. I'm even thinking about dating, though that terrifies me. My children check on me constantly, worried I'm lonely. But I'm not. For the first time in years, I'm actually comfortable being alone. I'm learning to enjoy my own company, to listen to my own thoughts, to figure out what I want instead of always putting everyone else first. The house is quiet now. Sometimes too quiet. But it's mine. Every corner of it is mine. And I'm slowly remaking it into a space that feels like me, not like the couple we were or the family we used to be. Just me. People ask me all the time if I forgive Robert. Honestly, I don't know. Some days I think I do. Other days I'm still so angry I could scream. But I'm learning that maybe forgiveness isn't a destination you reach. Maybe it's a journey you take, one day at a time, one step at a time, until eventually you realize you've traveled further than you thought possible. What I do know is this: Robert's letter, his final act of protection, gave me something precious. It gave me closure. It gave me justice. But most importantly, it gave me the truth. And the truth, no matter how painful, is always better than living in a beautiful lie. So to anyone out there who's discovered a secret that shattered their world, who's had to rebuild their life from ruins, who's wondered if they'll ever feel whole again, I want you to know something: you will survive this. It won't be easy. It won't be quick. But you will survive. And on the other side of survival, you might even find yourself thriving. I look at the woman I am now compared to the woman I was a year ago, and I barely recognize her. That Margaret was living a comfortable lie. This Margaret is living a difficult truth. And you know what? I prefer the truth. Because at least it's real. At least it's mine. Subscribe to hear more stories like mine. Stories about survival and strength and the complicated nature of love and betrayal. Stories about real people facing real challenges and finding their way through. Because we all have our secrets. We all have our scandals. We all have moments when everything falls apart and we have to decide whether to stay down or get back up. I got back up. And if you're reading this, if you've lived through your own shocking betrayal, your own family drama, your own moment when everything changed, then you got back up too. And that's something to be proud of. Robert left me that letter thinking he was protecting me from Vanessa. But what he really did was give me permission to stop protecting him. To stop making excuses. To stop living in the shadow of his choices. He set me free, even if he didn't mean to. So yes, there was a mistress. Yes, there was betrayal. Yes, my husband had a secret life that devastated me. But there was also justice. There was also truth. And there was also the beginning of a new story. My story. Not as Robert's wife, but as Margaret. Just Margaret. And she's turning out to be someone pretty remarkable. The letter Robert left me was his final gift. Not the money, not the justice, but the truth. And the truth, as they say, will set you free. Even if it breaks your heart first. I keep that letter in a drawer in my bedroom. I don't read it often, but I like knowing it's there. A reminder of where I've been and how far I've come. A reminder that even in our darkest moments, we have choices. We can choose bitterness or growth. We can choose to be victims or survivors. We can choose to let our pain define us or refine us. I choose to be refined by mine. I choose to let this shocking truth make me stronger, not bitter. I choose to honor the good parts of my marriage while acknowledging the bad. And I choose to believe that my story isn't over just because his ended. At 58, I'm learning to be brave. I'm learning to be honest. I'm learning to be myself. And that, more than any revenge or justice, is the real victory. Because Vanessa thought she'd won by taking my husband. But she didn't understand that you can't lose something that was already broken. And you can't steal someone's identity when they're finally brave enough to reclaim it. This is my storytime drama. This is my shocking revelation. This is what happens when everything you thought you knew turns out to be wrong, and and you have to build a new truth from the ashes of the old lies. And you know what? I'm going to be okay. Better than okay. I'm going to be free. If my story resonates with you, if you've lived through something similar or know someone who has, share this. Let's start conversations about love and betrayal and the messy, complicated truth of real relationships. Let's stop pretending everything is perfect and start being honest about our struggles. Because that's where real connection happens. That's where real healing begins. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here with me through all of this. And remember, no matter what secrets are revealed, no matter what betrayals you face, you are stronger than you think. You will survive. And someday, you'll even thrive. This is Margaret, signing off. Stay strong. Stay true. And never stop fighting for yourself.